Is she bigger than Sabalenka? Is she bigger than Coco? Is
Yes.
she the big?
Indeed. Greater than Sabalenka? Greater than Coco? It's insane, dude. She is having the same impact as Fonseca, the true rock star. Steve Johnson, a 12-year ATP veteran who has witnessed every type of star the sport can generate, said those things. He was not referring to a Grand Slam victor. He was referring to a 20-year-old Filipino who was rated 140th in the world 18 months prior. Alex Eala is her name. And the events that transpired in the weeks preceding Indian Wells 2026 compelled a whole sport to reevaluate who is truly in charge. Is it possible to transform that conviction into a profound Indian Wells run? Or is it still necessary to close the golf gap before the coronation is finished? Leave a comment with your prediction. Go back to March of 2025. Eala is a wild card going into Miami. No expectations, no sitting. Ranked so poorly that her name was unknown to the majority of casual fans. Madison Keys was defeated by her. The most powerful player in women's tennis, Agate, was then defeated by her. She made history by being the first Filipino to advance to the WTA 1000 semifinals. She had risen to the 50th spot in the world by year's end. In Guadalajara, she won her first WTA 125 championship. She signed on as a Nike Global Ambassador, and the walls of their Oregon headquarters were lined with pictures of her face, portraits honoring her people, her flag, and her heritage. Then came Dubai in February 2026. In straight sets, she defeated Jasmine Paolini, who was sitting ninth. The first game ended in a tie break, 6-1. An opponent in the top 8 was lowered to chasing shadows. In the 47-year history of the WTA, no Filipino woman had ever risen as high as Alex Eala, who was ranked 31st on February 23rd. Indian Wells then made its draw public. Eala might face Coco Gauff as early as the third round according to a projected path that had her at number 31 in the opening round. Her name had to be circled by the experts who had previously scrolled past it. The response came right away. Videos analyzing her ascent went viral on YouTube. Podcasts rushed to explain how a player they had hardly discussed a year prior was now surpassing the top stadium attendance figure in the world. Former top 20 player Steve Johnson made the statement that ignited the tennis media on the Nothing Major podcast. However, he affirmed what the masses had already demonstrated. Even seasoned champions were unable to match IA's ability to fill seats. This was no longer about potential. This concerned a competitive and commercial force that the establishment had failed to anticipate. Her practice with Sabalenka at Indian Wells was being observed by the same analysts who had written off her Miami run as an anomaly. There are two players on the same court who are at opposite extremes of the credibility timeline. In Miami, the evidence began to mount. 2025, two players in the top 10 were eliminated in the same week by a wild card rated 140th. The masses told a different story than that alone. Supporters in the stands claimed they have never witnessed something similar. Sections that had been half vacant during previous games were filled with Filipino flags. Attendance figures were confirmed by tournament staff to be higher than anticipated. The atmosphere was more akin to a concert than a tennis match. See the 140th ranked Monday of that Miami week. A player in the top 100 with a semi-final finish by Sunday. It was not an accidental trajectory. In real time, a pattern began to emerge. For the remainder of 2025, that trend intensified. Guadalajara won her first championship. The ranking rose above 70, 60, and 50. More flags, more prayers, and more proof that something extraordinary was developing were brought in by each tournament. Dubai 2026 attested to it. Eala stood on the court after defeating Paolini and posed a single question to the audience. How many of you have offered up prayers for me? For 115 million Filipinos watching worldwide, the subsequent roar was a response. Do you see the world's biggest attraction in women's tennis right now? Yes, what the audiences had previously shown was quantified when Steve Johnson spoke on the Nothing Major podcast a few days later. She is the biggest draw in women's tennis, according to him. Not a player to watch, not a future star. Present tense is the largest draw. Absolute rock star, he said. However, she truly is a rock star. The establishment is forced to listen when a 12-year tour veteran who has shared locker rooms with the biggest names in sports makes that allegation without being asked. There is a recurring pattern in Miami, Dubai, and now Indian Wells. First, the organizers are taken aback by the sheer number of people who show there. The outcomes then come next. The specialists then hurry to clarify what the fans had noticed months before. Here, Johnson's qualifications are important. Over the course of a career spanning more than 10 years at the top level, this player won numerous ATP titles. He has witnessed the rise and fall of stars. He has observed the distinction between content and hype. He did not make a cautious evaluation. He didn't mention that it might become the major attraction. He claimed that she was already more popular than Sabalenka and golf, attracting the kind of standing room audiences that are reserved for the sport's most exceptional players. Eala received her Indian Wells seat the same week that she obtained that endorsement. His remarks changed from commentary to prophecy due of the timing. Eala's inclusion at Nike's worldwide headquarters is a symbol of more than just one athlete's future. The commercial center of gravity for sports is changing. Grand Slam victories and fan armies were prerequisites for tennis greatness for decades. That formula is being reversed by Eala. Prior to the big awards, the fan army showed up. The ranking peaks were preceded by the commercial power. The same data is being tracked by tournament directors from Indian Wells to Miami to Roland Garros. A different form of value that goes beyond conventional measures is represented by a player who packs stadiums regardless of her seats. The first test of this new reality at the top level of the sport will take place at Indian Wells. The establishment will legally recognize what Filipino fans have known since Miami in the 2026 season if the crowds reach Dubai's level of passion and the outcomes keep getting better. The following chapters are written by Indian Wells. The clay court swing through Madrid and Rome this week marks Miami's comeback in 3 weeks. Every incident turns into a new piece of information in a narrative that never slows down. The remaining distance was revealed in the Dubai quarterfinal matchup with Goff, 6-0, 6-2, a scoreline that was unambiguous. In her press conference following the game, Eala explicitly addressed it. She acknowledged that the gap was rather noticeable. No excuses, no diversion. But I'm on the right path, she continued. She was seated for the first time at a WTA 1000 event when she arrived at Indian Wells 14 days later. The route she mentioned had already started up again. The wild card run in Miami, the standing room crowds in Dubai, Johnson's clear statement, the Nike picture honoring her ancestry, and the seeding that changed the course of Filipino tennis history. And how many of you have prayed for me through it all? In ways that the sport has rarely seen, Alex Eala has turned fan loyalty into competitive momentum. The experts who previously disregarded her are now having to explain how they failed to notice the obvious. 115 million it was not missed by Filipinos. They were able to identify excellence before the rankings verified it. Before the seedings demanded respect, they filled stadiums. They thought it was safe to believe. Is it possible for Eala to transform that notion into a deep Indian well? Or is it still necessary to close the golf gap before the coronation is finished? Leave a comment with your prediction. You belong to the group that saw this news first if you have been following it since Miami. Fans that believed early on should subscribe now since this chapter is just getting started and they should be able to see every second of what happens next. What makes the rise of Alex Eala so unusual is the order in which everything is happening. In tennis history, global stardom usually follows Grand Slam titles. Win first, fame later. But Eala's trajectory is unfolding in reverse. The crowds, the viral highlights, the sponsorship attention, even the debates among analysts are arriving before the sport's biggest trophies. That's why veterans like Steve Johnson calling her a rock star carries so much weight. They've watched generations of players rise through the rankings, and they know how rare it is to see a fan movement this powerful form around someone still climbing toward the top. If the results eventually catch up to the scale of the support, if those packed practice courts at BNP Paribas Open turn into deep tournament runs, the tennis world may look back on this moment as the exact point when a new global superstar truly arrived. The real test now isn't whether Alex Eala can draw crowds. She has already proven that. The question is whether the results will scale with the attention. Every tournament she enters now carries a different kind of pressure. Packed practice courts, sold-out sessions, and global expectations create an atmosphere that most players only experience in Grand Slam finals. But this is where champions are built. If Eala can channel that energy instead of being overwhelmed by it, the gap between popularity and dominance could close faster than many analysts expect. And once that happens, the narrative surrounding her won't just be about potential, it will be about inevitability. At the same time, her rise is quietly reshaping the geography of tennis fandom. Millions of Filipino supporters across Asia, the Middle East, Europe, and North America are suddenly tuned into tournaments they might never have followed before. That kind of audience expansion is gold for a global sport. For events like BNP Paribas Open, it means new television markets, stronger sponsorship interest, and an entirely new demographic engaging with the game. If the momentum behind Eala continues through the Grand Slam season, the WTA may discover that it hasn't just gained a rising star, it has unlocked one of the most passionate global fan bases tennis has.